Hello everyone, welcome to Gravity Sketch Design Sync, a place to talk all things design. In this episode, we will be talking with David Cullimore about his and his sister's cycling trousers. They have designed these cycling trousers for people that casually cycle or go to work to avoid people looking like they're going to the Tour of France. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, David.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Well, it must be really exciting and you must be really busy right now with the campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a long few months getting ready for the campaign, but it's exciting to launch it and exciting to get feedback from all the people who'll be wearing our trousers.
Yeah, definitely. It would be really interesting to know what made you come up with the idea. I mean, in a way, I kind of imagine that it was because you're cycling and you realized that it was a pain. But, tell us a little bit about how did
Sure.
it happen? It's you and your sister that created the trousers, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's funny working with your sister. That's another side point. If you ever start a company with your sibling, that's a separate topic. But going back to how we started it, it was back in 2019, kind of end of 2019. Jess and I were discussing ideas. We come from quite an entrepreneurial family, and we very often discuss ideas. We'll say something. We'll go, "What do you think about that?" And it was in response to an idea that I had about the kind of cycle industry or trying to get people to cycle that Jess said, no, the problem isn't related to that. The reason why people don't cycle is because they don't know what to wear. And I was a bit confused. I was like, what's going on? What do you mean they don't know what to wear? And then we thought about it a bit more and, looking up what people do in terms of actual behaviour, we notice there's kind of two classes of cyclists. There tends to be the people who wear lycra or sportswear, and that's fine. But if you're going for a 10-minute ride, it doesn't seem quite appropriate. So if you're, say, commuting to work, or if you're going for short trips in the city, it seems, a bit excessive to wear lycra, and also it might not suit your final end destination. So say if you're cycling to meet up with a friend to have a cup of coffee, well, are you going to then spend the rest of the day or that session in your sportswear? So that was one side of things. And then the other side of things is, okay, so you could wear lycra, you could wear sportswear. Oh, okay, I'll just wear normal clothes. But forgetting the fact that normal clothes were never designed for cycling in. So they don't fit very well. They, you might end up with your trouser leg caught in the chain side of the bicycle, so you end up either damaging your trouser leg or getting all over it. As I say, the fabrics might not necessarily work. They might not be stretchy enough. They might not be hard wearing enough. So there's a lot of things about normal clothes which aren't really suitable for cycling in. But we thought whether or not there was an opportunity to create a bit of a hybrid, essentially a new category of clothing, which is the casual cycle clothing. So clothing which essentially looks normal. So if you went out on the street wearing these clothes, it would look like pretty much normal clothes, but it has these discrete features that make it suitable for riding. So on your destination, when you arrive at your destination, it looks all fine, but the journey there wasn't painful, or you didn't have any problems. So it's fundamentally about creating this new clothing category. That's what for me is.
The issue here is the clothing in general. Like you were looking into how to disrupt almost the cycling dynamic, basically, and you thought about this idea as the little trigger to disrupt it and almost bring more people into the cycling, into cycling. Which I was reading on your Kickstarter campaign, you were saying that the cyclists have grown to 300% in the last year. That's crazy.
Yes. It's had a massive upturn over the pandemic. I mean, we thought this was a promising area pre-COVID. And then when COVID happened, we went, oh my word, this is even more important, because, it's obviously been kind of turbocharged by, several reasons. One of them being mass avoidance of public transport. People don't want to go on public transport because of COVID fears, and that's very true. And it might it will in time, but it's in these periods where people are trying new things and they'll adopt new behaviours. So once they've tried cycling a few times, they may then stick with it. But it's breaking that initial barrier, which is really tough. But this is the time when new habits get created. The funny thing is Jess, my co-founder and sister, she lives in London. Now, she was commuting using the train, using the tube, and she started cycling more and more. And she was going to the office, she was going to the park or wherever she was going. But she's a very good example of the model customer. So she's exactly that's the other thing that I always say about starting businesses. You need to be in the target audience to be able to know what to make. And she's a prime example of someone in our target audience. The other end of the spectrum, I'm very into cycling. So, it's my favourite sport. I do it whenever I can.
Hero
so
of the city commute.
Kind of between the two of us, I have this deep knowledge of cycling. But cycled, she also has the customer's eyes perspective. She will ask all the stupid questions.
Less cost.
And she'll be the voice of the customer. And
rediscovering cycling over lockdown made our lives better.
So your background is in industrial design. How, at the end of the day, you are still creating a product, right? It's not a hard product. Yeah. It's a fashion product, but it's at the end of the day something that somebody is going to be wearing. Was your process really different to what you were used on doing when you were doing industrial design products?
I mean, in some ways it is. In some ways it isn't. I mean, I'm familiar with creating you design a product or something, and you've got to create a drawing and you've got to get that manufactured. I mean, the drawing is about communication. You're telling someone to make something. You've got to give them quite specific instructions. Now, in that respect, it's the same. You create drawings, you try and communicate what you're after to a manufacturer. Now, say in kind of product design and engineering, you will have you'll have a 3D model of it. So you'll have in geometry in 3D, and that will describe a lot about the form, and it will show what the function is as well if you interpret it correctly. Now with clothing, it's very different. It's kind of all in 2D. So you just produce 2D drawings. I know there's some 3D CAD softwares for clothing, but most of the industry is still on 2D drawings. So you will do what is essentially a sketch, but it's done in Illustrator, and it's kind of like a technical drawing. But you'll produce your two views. You might do a front view, a back view. You'll do detailed views. So you'll show that here's a belt loop, here's a zip detail. But there are added complications with things like sizing, for example. So whereas you might make a product and you'll tolerance it and you'll put dimensions, and that's exactly what you'll get back. You have the added factor of when you're designing clothing, you'll have to have different sizes. Now, something I had to get my head around was this grading aspect of, well, you'll make one size and then you'll go up some sizes and down some sizes, and the proportions aren't always the same. So what that kind of means from kind of like a design drawing perspective is that is captured in one size, but it will be different on some of the other sizes, and that's where you've got to. I mean, that's where partnering with a good manufacturing company will help you, overcome some of these challenges. But the product is kind of different for every size, if you know what I mean. So it has some peculiarities with industrial design. You create a toothbrush, that is the toothbrush. You sign off the design, but there's it's slightly different.
You're not creating just one product, you're creating 10, basically.
Effectively, yeah.
All right, but you said, this is really important. You start with a sketch, right? Everything, your idea starts with a sketch. And you said it's a 2D sketch, and it's very different to when you are doing product design, because product design, you tend to have to create some sort of like three-dimensional representation still through a 2D sketch, right? You're still having to make a perspective drawing out of it. In fashion, you you do only have like these kind of like flat views of your design. How is this, like, how do you translate what you have in your head? Because you're probably thinking about this three-dimensional person wearing the trousers that you designed, and then you're sketching them in 2D. Like, how is that working in your mind? And was it difficult for you because you were already used on having, you know, this 3D workflow?
Yeah, I know what you mean. In some respects, it is simple. I think where you might face challenges where you have specific details that, say, really matter with the fit and the finish. So if you imagine, say, you know, we all know what trousers look like, and we all know kind of how they fit and the different fit styles, etc. I mean, one of the features that we've added onto the trouser that we've launched is a high back.
They feature a subtle curved back waistband to keep your lower back covered while riding,
which is quite commonly seen on kind of sports performance cycling clothing. So it gives you better coverage on the back, because obviously when you're riding, you end up with your back exposed. Now, that's a relatively easy thing to imagine. You say, okay, if we had a bit more material here, that would add greater coverage. But there are other details. For example, we spent quite a bit of time trying to think of a good solution for the ankle strap. So the men's trouser features this adjustable ankle strap on the right hand side leg. So this is the leg that is on the chain side. Now, as I said earlier, you can sometimes end up with that trouser leg getting caught in the teeth of your, you know, front chainring on your bike, or getting dirty on the chain, you know, the oil stains. So we were thinking, okay, so if you could tie together that fabric, or at least keep it out of the way, keep it tight to the leg, that will be a good benefit to the wearer / rider. But how do we do that? Now, we came up with so many different solutions and tried different things, and we prototyped it, and there was a lot of theory, but nothing beats, you know, creating a prototype and just trying it yourself. Now, the bit that we kind of struggled on was, obviously you've got the fit and the kind of human anatomy. So we came up with the solution of having an ankle strap with poppers, because, you know, we were thinking about several things. We wanted something that was super simple and easy to do. If it took 5 minutes to be able to tie this thing up, like some kind of, you know, setting up a tent or something, you know, where you got the ropes and stuff. If it was difficult to do, then no one would do it, and that would be beside the point. Equally, it's got to be quite robust. You can't break it easily, and it's got to be it's got to have quite a long lifetime. You know, the product. If it's, for example, if it contains certain elastics or certain materials, where you think, okay, if I wash this at a high temperature, you know, what if this elastic fails? This product is now sort of obsolete. So we're thinking about loads of these different factors when we're trying to create the trouser. But I think one of the aspects that we particularly struggled on initially was this, you know, where do we put the poppers? And going back to the sizing thing, is how much adjustment do people need, and, you know, and where along the leg is that going to go? Because it's important, because, you know, if you look at the ankle, the human ankle, you've got a bulge here, and it's slim here, and the way that it sits on the human body, it's quite important. But kind of going back to your question, I think it depends on what aspect you're dealing with, but it's certainly, I think the details are where it can be really applied to in this kind of fashion design. And
so you were making a lot of prototypes. You started with a simple pair of chinos that you started just, I guess, prototyping on, cutting, adding things to it.
Yeah, that was exactly it. I mean, we just bought some standard commercially available chinos and started modifying them, because that was essentially the basis. Was we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. People want to wear chinos. This is the type of clothing we wear. Now, if our objective is to create a pair of trousers that is, you know, similar to the existing in terms of style and fit and look, then we may as well start. We already have 90% of the prototype made. We're talking about details here. So that's where we started, and we modified it and did all sorts of things.
That's really, I mean, that it's really good product design. You were thinking about usability and durability, which is key. And you were also thinking, you know, what is it exactly that we're trying to achieve? And you're not trying to recreate, you know, something that is already working, a pair of chinos. It's only that small detail that, yeah, you're looking to change. How, I mean, I imagine the whole prototyping phase was with you and Jess, like cutting things, putting them together. You were doing it, I imagine, together in the same place, or were you, because she's in London and you're somewhere else, were you doing it long distance, or were you working together in the same workshop? How was this happening?
Most of the development has been separate. So if this is a lesson for remote work, this is a prime example of what you can achieve separately. Yeah, so we don't live together. I don't even live in London, so I don't even live in the same city. But there were times where we come together and discuss prototypes, and you know, we'd have an intensive week here or there. But it's certainly possible to do separately. I mean, luckily, the other thing that we say kind of amongst ourselves is that, I mean, we're very fortunate that we're both very generalist in our skill set. So I know this isn't a business podcast, but it's funny when you pick a co-founder and when you're doing these things, you know, they often say go for complementary skills, stuff that you can't do. Well, we've actually found the opposite in having kind of virtually the same skill set, but in different areas as well, that you can cover for each other. Because you can do your own bit of prototyping and she can do her own prototyping at the same time. And yeah, it's important to collaborate. There's you know, time and a place for that. But also having the separation is quite good as well, because you can come up with your own ideas, and it's and it doesn't get siloed in one area. It's just like you're the prototyper or you're the person who makes that. So if you have a lot of crossover, there's benefits to it.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that. My co-founder is also a designer. I'm a designer, and we tend to do things very different. We think about solving issues in a very different way. So even though we have the same skills, the solutions and the way that we tackle things are very different. And I imagine you and Jess have been doing the same. But it's really interesting when we hear about stories on how people are developing products, like still developing physical things, in this very difficult year where, you know, people are not being able to just get together and work on the physical things in the same place. How long did it take you to develop the prototype before you were ready to start talking to men?
I don't think it took too long. I think the core product was, in essence, pretty developed, you know, kind of mentally. I mean, it was, yeah, we'd try a few, like, for example, the ankle strap. We tried several iterations of that, but we knew we wanted one. And we knew we wanted this and that and a few other things. So I think if you have an idea of what you're trying to create, that's a very important step. And, you know, the benefits of prototyping, I don't need to tell you that, the benefits of prototyping. But I think it was only around 3 to 4 months before we started talking to manufacturers. So not too long. And obviously that was exacerbated because of, you know, being apart and testing and getting feedback and stuff like that. So that was probably perhaps longer, but it took around, yeah, kind of that 4-month period.
Did you already have Kickstarter as the main go-to-market strategy, or was it something that came up while you were working on the project?
It was pretty early on because it's... you know, it's fundamentally about financing. I mean, there's a minimum order quantity imposed by these manufacturers. So, you know, how else are we going to be able to fund the first batch? And, you know, all the benefits of Kickstarter, you know, developing a following and, you know, having a good launch. And as we said earlier, it's about this market feedback. And if your product isn't popular, then it's, you know, you should listen to the market feedback. So for a variety of reasons, but it was pretty clear early on that we needed to launch on Kickstarter.
It's a good way to just be putting your project, your product out, and like having, it almost forces you, like, I have 30 days to let everyone in the world know that we exist. That's it. You know, we went through a similar thing with Gravity Sketch really long time ago, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, we launched our Kickstarter campaign for the VR app that we were working on, and it was almost meant to fail, because it was a software meant to be used by designers that wanted to sketch in 3D using virtual reality. So many years ago, not a lot of designers had VR headsets, and so we were waiting for designers that had VR headsets that were going into Kickstarter to look for software. It was almost non-existent, right? But a good thing that came out of it, even if the campaign wasn't successful, we started talking to the very few people that were really, really interested in using Gravity Sketch. And it turned out that a lot of the people in the automotive industry were interested in using Gravity Sketch for their work. So it wasn't successful in that way, but it led us to start talking to all the car manufacturers. So, you never know where these things are going to
timing.
take you.
That's why timing is so important. You've got to catch the right wave. I mean, for Gravity Sketch, I think it was early. I know of, say, design studios who are only just getting their VR headsets now. Imagine not 5 years ago. But I mean, kind of once you've got it, I don't know how you could go back. I mean, it's just kind of a bit game changing, particularly in the 3D world. When I've tried it and I've seen products being developed, and you just get that sense of scale which you cannot get from a kind of 2D screen. Even though you're showing 3D CAD, you just don't get that same feeling for it. I mean, in my kind of personal experience, when I have seen VR mock-ups of stuff, it's just that scale that had the greatest impact for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Scale, absolutely, 100%. That's why you end up having to do mock-ups, right, and prototypes to experience it in the real world. So let's go back a little bit to talking about that, actually, experiencing it in the real world, as in you've thought about this idea, you sketched it on a piece of paper, probably. You started prototyping on chinos that already existed. What happens next? How do you go about choosing the right fabric? Because the fabric, in your case, is really important, right? It needs to be really good and achieving exactly what you're looking for it to achieve. It's like any sportswear clothing, you need to be very precise about your fabric.
Yeah, and that was an interesting choice, and we were quite keen on having a fabric that looked and felt like kind of standard chino fabric. I mean, we could have gone down the technical fabric route, and some people have said, well, it has very conventional materials. What the hell? Why didn't you go for some more modern materials? And that was a very deliberate choice, because we wanted to pick fabrics that kind of the user was comfortable with, they were familiar with. It looked like, other fabrics in their wardrobe. Now, the point wasn't to, arrive at your meeting wearing the trousers and you look, why is she wearing the kind of technical outdoor trousers to our board meeting? The idea is, life on and off the bike. So to be able to, go on with your life as normal. But you're right. It was very important for us to be able to pick a fabric that, say, looked good, but also performed well on the bike. So it had to have a reasonable level of stretch in it. So not much stretch. So, too little stretch, and you'd cause the fabric to, you'd rip the fabric or rip some of the stitches as the person got on the bike. Too much, and then you kind of go into the kind of sportswear and leggings, that kind of realm. So it's, picking a fabric was an interesting process. But also, what you've got to remember is a fabric sample, say a small, a little square of fabric like that, that is very different from an entire pair of trousers made from that fabric. So we'd go through the samples. We have a book of samples. And we go, oh yeah, that feels nice. Oh, look at the surface of that, the twill, etc. And you go, oh yeah, is that stretch enough? And you go, okay, that's great. We'll try that. So when you get the full pair of trousers back, it's very different, the material, and you've got stitching and you've got other features to it, and it suddenly doesn't quite feel as stretchy as you thought it would be. So it's quite a process. It's like in any kind of product design, you'd want to make the product out of the final material if possible. Because, how do you know what it's going to feel like, what the weight of it's going to be, how, the interaction of the materials. So, always prototype using the final material if possible. In our case, we had to see the kind of final product. We're lucky in the sense that we don't have to have any kind of tooling or anything like that. We don't have to, invest in £30,000 or dollars worth of tooling before we can even try it. We can quite cheaply and easily make a very representative pair of trousers, which is another area which I like in the clothing industry compared to, say, some other industries. So it is a very important part of clothing, picking the fabric, certainly.
And so were you already working with the manufacturers in Portugal or doing these prototypes, or was it with someone else? How do you go about this prototyping phase?
I tell you, that was probably the hardest thing of the last year, is finding a manufacturer. And that was made worse because of COVID. Because the kind of times that we were looking for a manufacturer, we were looking around April 2020, May 2020, and that was obviously when the whole COVID thing really hit and it was bad. And there was also the same time when people were looking for personal protective equipment, so PPE and masks and aprons and all sorts of stuff. So that was definitely the wrong time to get clothing made. So in our experience, the whole of the clothing industry basically said, no, we're doing PPE. We're not open for making, clothing. There were governments placing orders. There was, other commercial entities. They're saying, stop making clothing. Don't make a T-shirt. We need, 100,000 masks now. So there was, it was quite the journey getting something made, but eventually things opened up, and once that initial demand was fulfilled, people started talking to us. But it was, we tried to reach out to a lot of people, and eventually we found one that would talk to us and then prototype our product.
And you have been doing all of this remotely, or have you traveled to Portugal?
No, I've not been to Portugal yet.
All right.
I probably would have. Had it been normal, I probably would have. I probably would have gone there for a week, set up arrangements or meetings or whatever. And, you'd like to see the factory, you'd like to see the conditions, and you'd like to see, what kind of setup they've got. But, in the situation that we're in, that was all we could do. So it's tricky. It's hard to trust. You don't know. On email, on a website, you don't know how much capacity they've got. You don't know what their standards are like. So it's difficult. But in some ways, the prototype does tell a little bit about the output of the factory. So not ideal, but we had to make do.
Exactly. And you did what you could with the circumstances, and you've done well. Your Kickstarter campaign is live, and it seems to be going really, really well. So you are manufacturing the trousers in a sustainable way. How is this? Mm-hmm. Like, what do you mean by that? And what when you put in a balance, let's manufacture something sustainable versus let's just make it happen because we're just getting started and we just need to be producing these trousers. How do you put that in a balance?
Yeah, it's really tricky. Of course, I think we all want to make sustainable clothing, and the fashion industry doesn't have a great reputation for it, and I'm fully aware of that. Sustainability to us is, in some respect, our mission is somewhat sustainable in terms of, if we're trying to encourage people to ride their bikes, that is a somewhat, that is a sustainable activity. So our mission is sustainability based. So, it's not the only reason. There's several reasons why people will ride their bikes instead of, say, taking public transport or their cars. But it's one of the reasons. Now, it comes down to a bit of circumstance. So if you're Patagonia and you have the resources of Patagonia, you've got the time and you've got the capital and you've got the customer base, and you'll be able to, vet and check out every factory on Earth. Yeah, it's probably easier to create a product that's fully sustainable. Now, if you're at the other end of the spectrum where you're an early stage startup, you haven't got the capital, you haven't got the time, or you haven't got the resources to be able to vet every factory, yeah, it's difficult, because you'll make the decisions of, okay, do I go for a really cheap manufacturer because I'm just getting going and that's the only option I have available, or do I go for one which is more sustainable? Now, Portugal in general has a very high reputation for, the standard of clothing. They also have a lot of sustainable practices. They've been doing it for a while. The industry has been shaped. I mean, there's had a bit of a shake-up recently, but it's, the clothing manufacturers are demanding sustainable practices because that's what the final end customer is demanding. And that's, that's good for the industry and, ultimately good for the end customers. But I can sympathize with early stage startups when they're thinking about, early stage manufacturing, because you have to make decisions that will mean your business survive, even if it's not the most sustainable thing to do on day one, but your objective is to get to a sustainable manufacturing in the long term. It's just, will you get there? And if you don't, you might not survive. That's the thing. You might not even get to that stage. So yeah, I really sympathize with these kind of startup founders making these decisions.
And it's also a really good advice from your side, right? If anyone is listening and looking to start a project, it's really thinking about putting all these different things in the balance, right? And making sure that first you survive, obviously without just destroying the world, but first you make things happen and then slowly work towards the goal that you have. In your case, sustainability is something really important.
Yeah, exactly.
How were you communicating with the manufacturers? It was all long distance. It was around prototypes that they were sending. Would you be making annotations on the prototypes? Would you be sticking things on them? How was this communication, and then sending the trousers back to them?
Sure. So if you're not familiar with the clothing industry, they have the drawings are known as tech packs. Now, the tech packs, as I kind of mentioned earlier, they are purely 2D drawings. So you will show all the details. You'll show, this is the men's one, this is the front angle, this is what it looks on the back, etc. And you will list out all the details. So you'll have, this is the type of zip we want, or this is the type of button we want on it. And, you might give kind of examples. You might give pictures. You say, oh, I found this on another pair of trousers. I like this detail. Can we have that in? And obviously you'll factor that into the drawing. So you'll create a tech pack drawing and you'll send that, and obviously as I mentioned earlier, that will be graded. So for the funny learnings here is that some manufacturers will take your drawing as gospel. They will literally produce the scale version of your trousers, and it will be horrendous fit. The legs will be huge or really short, or the back, and it's very peculiar because on the drawing it's kind of like not to scale, and you kind of say don't make this but do make this. I want it like this but to the fit of another pair of trousers. So yeah, we had that where we had, I think it was the very first pair of prototypes we had back, and they were just terrible fit. I mean, really terrible. No, I had several people tried it, and nobody was it remotely right. So one of the ways that we got around that was supplying sample trousers, so existing commercially available trousers, as a fit grade. So you say, okay, this is the drawing, this is the style, I'd like it like this, but I'd like it to be to the fit and style of this pair. So they have that example. They can basically reverse engineer it. They can go, okay, this is how big the front panel will be. This is how big the rear panel will be, and it's a bit of a blueprint. It's it's a bit of a cheat sheet, I guess. But the things you've got to remember is the humans are humans are same in the respect of a clothing manufacturer has spent a lot of time perfecting the fit and shape of this, and humans, they vary. But the fact is that you can't be too different, otherwise it won't fit anyone. So it's a good kind of rule of thumb, as it were. In terms of communications, I mean, it depends on the manufacturer, but I mean, I had some of the world's longest email chains going, so it was quite messy, I tell you.
Okay, but I imagine it's part of it, right? Part of the industry and how it works.
I'm fairly new to fashion, so I can't really comment on how the other manufacturers are. But I mean, I have some experience in the industrial design world, and it's slightly, it is different, and you have to be. I mean, if you've got long email chains and there's comments and stuff like that, you've got to be hyper aware of who said what and what requests you've made and what changes. And I mean, we went round the point. I mean, we gave some initial feedback, and then we thought, okay, actually, the best way to do this is to resubmit the drawings. To say, okay, we've said this, we've said that. We're just going to provide you with updated versions of the drawings with our feedback on for the future versions, because things get lost, and you're dealing with an account manager who then passes it on to a production manager, who then communicates with a seamstress or material suppliers or whoever, and things can get lost in translation very quickly. Well, there's the language barrier as well, because obviously they're Portuguese, but the keeping track of it is super important, and keeping updated drawings is critical, and making sure that everybody's on the right iteration of this is version 3. Make sure everybody's on this version, because you don't want to receive the wrong pair of trousers. You've made the old version. That would be a disaster. Yeah,
and something really important that you said is, you have these massive email chains, but at the end of the day, it's really the visual way in which you're communicating something, the thing that almost brings everyone to really understand what's happening, or what it's not happening, but at least you have something there that everybody can relate to. Otherwise, if you're speaking just with words, like if you're just talking about it, then some people might be imagining some things and some people might be imagining some others. That being said, you said that through the sketch, it was also very, it's this sketch, you make something exactly like this, and obviously the trousers were not fitting anyone. So it's kind of like a balance between the two, I guess.
Yeah, and some of them will take it. They'll make it to the drawing, and then some people won't make it to the drawing at all. Like, for example, the female trousers, they don't have rear pockets, and one manufacturer assumed, well, the men's have rear pockets. We'll put. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't rear pockets. It was belt loops. The belt loops. The female doesn't have any belt loops on it, and that was a deliberate style decision that we made. The men's had them, so okay, the females must have them. So in some respects, they will treat the drawing as, we will do exactly to the drawing. And in some respects they won't. They'll go a bit freestyle and rogue. You don't often get that in product design, where they go, okay, this we'll put a handle here on this table or cupboard or whatever. So it's it's a quirk of the industry, and I think it will be different for every manufacturer.
Yeah, definitely. And you've been really resourceful in just finding that, the pairs of trousers that work already, that are already made and fit well to what you wanted them to be, and then just using them as something to get started with. I think it's something really key for anyone that is trying to make something, to design something. Sometimes we tend to be okay, we want to be super innovative in whatever we're doing, but then you end up realizing that there's these little key things that have already been resolved for us, so we don't really need to be resolving them again.
Yeah, exactly. Don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, you have to focus on the areas that you're adding the most value to, or the in our case, objectively the clothes are not much different, but the sum of the parts does mean, we're kind of hopeful that this trouser, although it isn't fundamentally very different from other pairs of trousers, it enables this whole other lifestyle, because suddenly you've got something that can take, you can ride your bike to, say, this whole lifestyle piece where you go to the coffee shop, or you go pick up the kids from school, or you do something if you could integrate the bike as more of a lifestyle piece, and the clothing matched that kind of lifestyle, it would be quite a fundamental shift from the current lifestyle that people have. But it all boils down to some features on a pair of trousers. Yeah. But it doesn't seem like much, but it adds up to this whole kind of, and it will mean different things to different people. But fundamentally, if we can get more people riding their bikes as a result of our clothing.
It's been super interesting to learn how you've gone from just having an idea with your sister all the way to actually making it happen, already having manufacturers working on your project, and now being live on Kickstarter, which, guys, if you haven't checked their Kickstarter campaign, we're going to link it down below. Make sure to check it out. Make sure to back them if you can. Is there anything else, David, that you would like to tell the audience in regards to your project or your campaign?
Yeah, I think it would be the feedback piece. I mean, if you've got any comments or suggestions, I mean, we're starting with the pair of trousers as the kind of first piece, but we do have ambitions to create a whole range. And we can see several other products. We can see t-shirts, jackets, base layers, all sorts of things. Now, I'd love to hear about some of your ideas, or what are the things that you'd like to see? What are the annoyances that you have? Why do you do what you do? As I say, as a designer, this is really interesting. So if you've got any of that kind of feedback, just let us know. That'd be greatly appreciated.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. Say hi to Jess. Good luck with everything.
Yeah.
Looking forward to see where your brand goes.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Hopefully it carries on for much longer.